Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another live episode of Dome at Home. We are here live, not recorded like last week's, and we are here to talk about the upcoming skies of August. Now, it's new moon. It looks like it's going to be clear here in southern Manitoba this evening. Right after the show, I'm basically getting all my stuff ready to go and going to do some observing tonight, I hope. Get out under the stars. And the only thing I'll have to make sure I do is bring enough bug spray, because the mosquitoes, at least in my end of town, are still pretty bad. Good to see everybody checking into the chat. Always nice to say hi to everybody. Oh, Steve updates us. It's Gold Eyes 5 and the other team 0. He's over at the stadium right now. Oh, Vivian, you were in at the museum and you checked out the dinosaur show. That's very cool. And Manitoba Skies, our live show. Yeah, we've got some great staff working the planetarium, and their shows are always different, always unique. And actually, depending on whose show you see, there's a little different spin on it, because everybody puts their own sort of personality and interests into the show as well. So never gets old, even though we've had the same title running, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, Manitoba Skies. It's a different show every time. Okay, we have a whole bunch of stuff coming on this week. I have a few bits of news to share with you, some upcoming live events. We're scheduling some events for August where you can either join us online or join us in person to look through telescopes and things like that. And of course, there's all sorts of cool space stuff to get into. So let's jump into it right away. First of all, thank you to those of you who have gone to our Manitoba Museum Tomorrow site and filled in the survey of what you'd like to see the Manitoba Museum, Planetarium, and Science Gallery sort of grow into. Our CEO, Dorota Blumczynska, has been reading all of this stuff that's coming in from all sorts of stakeholders, we call them, but basically it's people who are in the community. And we'd love to hear what you have to say about, the planetarium specifically, but also the whole institution. You only have a few more days. It's only on until the end of July. So you have a few more days to give us your feedback on what you'd like to see the museum grow into. And like I said, I'd love to have lots of planetarium representation in there in terms of the kinds of things that you would like to see us do. So remember, only a couple more days to get your say in on that. We also have a bunch of viewer images that came in over the last couple of weeks, because of course we've had last week was a pre-recorded show, so I didn't put any viewer images in there because I really like to talk about them. So we've collected up quite a few. Here's a great shot. Andy and Ruby Takats have given us a shot of Saturn. You may remember last live show 2 weeks ago, they were talking about the sort of little mini constellations that they made up of the stars surrounding the area of Saturn. There was mini Orion's belt and the parallelogram and mini Corona Borealis. Well, there's Saturn in the image there. And if we just sort of, here, we'll just zoom in on this little area just to make it a little clearer. There's our little mini Orion's belts. There's the parallelogram, and there's mini Corona Borealis. And interestingly, Saturn is now on this side of the Orion's belt. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, it was over there. So in just a couple of weeks, they've detected the orbital motion of Saturn, which is kind of cool. And so Saturn will be sort of in this region for a while. So those are some great milestones to sort of mark what you can see there in terms of, seeing how the planet moves. They also sent in a nice shot of Mars and the Pleiades. Mars has moved way over from Jupiter, and so it's kind of by itself, but it's heading off towards the Pleiades. And over the next month or so, towards the end of August, it'll cruise past the Pleiades and over towards the other star cluster in Taurus, the Hyades. So this is sort of morning sky, but you can really see the sort of orangey color. Well, at least I can on my monitor. I don't know what happens once it gets out into internet land. But another great shot from you guys. Thanks for getting up early and bringing us these views. Terry sent us some images a while back, and somehow I misfiled them and didn't put them into the next show, and I just rediscovered them. And so I want to show some of them now. So Terry's been doing a bunch of photography since the beginning of the year and has come up with some great images. Here we've got the Big Dipper sort of in and amongst the clouds there. Here's a great shot of Orion from back in February. You really get the whole hourglass figure there, the sword of Orion, and there's the Orion Nebula, that little fuzzy spot in the middle there, and really sort of jumps out. And then as we go on, then we're also getting some of those planets as well. So there you've got Jupiter and Mars and Venus, I think those are, with the moon in the upper left there. So thanks very much, Terry. Sorry it took me so long to get those out, but great job on bringing those images in. And this particular image was a great reminder because here you can see 3 planets, even though they're through the trees. Like I have trees like this, and I sort of just figure if something's in the trees, I'm not going to see it. But if you go at the right time, when it's not covered with leaves, you can actually sort of get a window through those if you line it up properly. So I'll have to keep that in mind once the leaves fall again. Ulrika has done some great stuff. This is a great shot of the last quarter moon. And this image reminded me of how important focus is. Because you take a picture of the moon, and sometimes it turns out, yeah, that's okay. And sometimes it's just perfect and crisp and amazing. And the difference is how close you are to focus. Your camera only needs to be just a hair out of focus to turn a really crisp image into a soft kind of mediocre kind of image. And this one is just perfectly focused. You can see very, very crisp detail all along the southern highlands here, these craters and the lunar Apennines up here. I think I've got a blow up here. And yeah, just a huge amount of detail. And right along the edge here, there's even these little mountain ranges that sort of poke up. You can see the edge of the moon isn't just perfectly round and flat. There's detail and relief there. So great shot, Ulrika. Thank you very much. Another one from Ulrika. We have Mars, the moon, and Jupiter. This was just a couple nights ago, I guess. Beautiful image. And again, catching all of those things sort of in a very, very wide field is kind of a challenge because they are really, really spread out now. But it's nice to still sort of see. You've got this, alignment, if you want to think of it that way, of the planets, the plane of the solar system. They're all basically in that plane. Here's a shot from Matthew Buller. We often hear from Dale and James Buller, and their son grabbed this with a Samsung 22 phone. So this is a cell phone picture, which, first of all, that blows my mind. Second of all, great shot of the Milky Way rising up out of the southern horizon there. You've got this beautiful bright thing here, all of these star clouds. You've got the dark lane, the Cygnus Rift it's called, sort of a dark dust lane along here. There's some more Milky Way up here, and then down in the southern part towards Sagittarius, there's all these little clusters. This is the Sagittarius star cloud in here. This is the Lagoon Nebula right about there, and then there's this mysterious object, this bright thing right there, and I'm thinking, geez, what is that? Which planet is that? Well, it turns out that there's actually a radio tower that you can only see when you blow this image up right about here, and that's the light on the radio tower. So I spent about 20 minutes trying to figure out what that was until I finally was able to zoom in enough, and you can just barely see the tower there. So anyway, you never know what you're going to catch when you're taking shots of the sky. Great shot, Matthew. Thanks very much for that. And then Jim Webb sent in this image. This is, of course, from the James Webb Space Telescope, and it's a picture of Jupiter in the infrared. And this was not meant to be an amazing picture. This was just a test image to show how the telescope could track moving targets like the moons of Jupiter, which move on a fairly quick basis. And so it was just a test image, but I still like it. And we have heard rumblings of what else James Webb Space Telescope has been imaging, but all of those images go to the primary investigators and the scientists, and they get their own time to look at them first so that they can, do the science and the research and publish the papers and things like that. It's a little bit competitive. So if all those pictures went out to the public right away, then someone could sort of, rush a paper out before them, and then their funding's in jeopardy. It's a whole big thing. So we do know that one of the targets that James Webb Space Telescope has observed is the TRAPPIST-1 system. You might remember this. This is the sun-like star with 7 planets orbiting it, 6 of which are Earth-sized. We've looked at that one, and I'm pretty sure it'll be the Canadian spectroscope instrument nearest that will actually be analyzing the atmosphere of those planets. So that is very exciting. I can't wait, because that's that many Earth-like planets. If those atmospheres contain oxygen or water vapor or any of the other kinds of signs of life, that would be huge. Anyway, we'll have to see when that comes out, but we'll see. Yeah. Okay, let us move on to a couple of other live events that are happening. We are going to be going live for the Perseid meteor shower this year. Now, it turns out that the Perseid meteor shower peaks August the 13th, early in the morning, on the 14th actually, and it's just 2 days after full moon. Normally, when the moon is bright like that, you don't see a lot of meteors. I'm going to turn it into a night anyway, because that's also the same night that the planet Saturn is at opposition. And so even if we're not seeing as many images of meteors, we'll have great views, hopefully, of Saturn. And then, you stay long enough, Jupiter comes up, the moon, of course, lots of things to look at through the telescope. So we'll be doing a live stream that evening, and we'll be alternating between the Meteor Cam, all-sky camera for the Perseids, and also close-up views of the planets through the telescope. So that's coming up August 13th, and you can join us right here beginning about 11 o'clock. Weather permitting, of course. If it's cloudy, we'll postpone it to the next clear night that I also am available. And then, at the end of August, Ben's asking, when's dawn August 13th? Around 5 in the morning, it starts to get pretty bright. I'm not saying I'll be awake until 5, but the stream will be running till 5. It just might be a very quiet stream with only a little bit of snoring in the background. We'll see how that goes, though. The next event is Monday, August 29th, and that is the hopeful launch of Artemis 1, the robotic mission to the moon, the test flight of the Artemis mission. Launch is scheduled for 7:33 a.m. our time. We'll get our stream running about an hour beforehand, and we'll of course bring you any updates on any delays that may happen. I strongly suspect that there will be delays, but this isn't like the International Space Station where you have to launch at an exact moment, and if you miss it, you have to wait a bunch of time. They've got 2 whole hours where they can, if there's a problem, they can hold things for 5 or 10 minutes, fix the problem, and then continue on. They've got a 2-hour launch window. So maybe it will go on the 29th. We'll have to see. If not, the next window is the following Friday, which is actually a little more convenient time for me. Doesn't start till, a reasonable time in the morning. And actually my favorite would be as if it goes on Monday the 5th, because that's basically prime time for us to be able to watch. So anyway, whenever that happens, we'll be coming live with it. So you can stay subscribed to the Dome at Home and the Manitoba Museum sites, and you'll get the updates on that. Let's see, we have a few, lots of folks saying hello. Folks way out in the west. Hey, Linda, nice to see you, sitting at the ferry terminal, waiting to cross back to Vancouver. Yeah, I'm old enough to still occasionally sit here and be amazed that here in my basement I'm talking to people, way out west in Vancouver, and Krishna's down there in Houston, and earlier in the program's history, we had this regular viewer from Malaysia that was tuning in all the time. Just amazing. Like, how does that, the future is now. Of course, my kid is like, what do you mean? You couldn't do that when you were a kid? No, I couldn't. Okay, let us move on to our feature for the month, or for the week, pardon me. And that is to take a look at sort of a preview of the August sky. July is pretty much done. We're going to take a look at the second half of the summer holidays for most people. Certainly the second half of the of the school summer holiday, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the sky. I mean, there's the regular things. There's the things that every August we can see. You know, the Milky Way comes up. We've got the summer triangle. We've got the summertime constellations and the various star clusters and deep sky objects and nebulas that are there every year. We've also got some of the transient events, things like the planets, where they happen to be, or the moon being near a certain thing in the sky on a certain night. That changes each August. And then we've got really the special events that may or may not happen every year. So there's a bunch of things going on. We're going to start off with the constellations because those certainly are the sort of old faithful things. Sorry, I just see a bunch of chats go by. Oh, hi Len, nice to see you. Hopefully we can hook up next week. And let's see. Oh, Chris is out there from Astronomy by the Bay in cloudy St. John, New Brunswick. Yeah, we have some. We've had some clouds ourselves. Actually, we got about 5 inches of rain over the last 2 or 3 days in my backyard. So it's pretty crazy. But glad you could join us. And for those of you that don't know, Astronomy by the Bay runs the Sunday Night Astronomy Show, which runs every Sunday at 6 o'clock Central Time, which is right when I eat dinner. So I usually wind up watching it after the fact. But it's a great group of folks, Chris and Paulo, and they have sort of binocular segments and, you know, just a fantastic show. It's the kind of thing that if I had more people on the show and the ability to do so, I'd aspire to do that kind of thing. So you should definitely check out their show as well. All right, let us get to our constellations. The summer triangle is the key to the summer sky. We've talked about this multiple times. It is the big, bright group of stars, each star part of a separate constellation, and very, very useful because the stars are bright. Even from inside the city, you'll see them. They form a pretty regular isosceles triangle. I mean, it looks very recognizable. And the Milky Way goes right through it, basically starting over here at Deneb and then heading off through Altair and down towards the southern horizon. So that is a great marker for finding those things, especially on a night where maybe the moon is up and so you can't see the Milky Way very well, or maybe you're in your backyard in the city and you can't see it because of lights. Maybe it's just too humid and the transparency is not very good. You can't see the Milky Way. You'll at least know where it is by finding the summer triangle and going through it. And then you can go along there with binoculars and you'll spot all sorts of wonderful little things. There are some great constellations inside the summer triangle. There are 2 of them that are completely inside. This is Sagitta the Arrow. I think we talked about it before. And this is Vulpecula the Fox. Vulpecula the Fox. 2 stars. And I have no idea why that gets to be a constellation. Why not these 2 stars? Who knows? But anyway, Vulpecula is there, right in a very rich area of the sky here. Along the southern horizon, and this was something that Matthew Buller's picture showed, the Milky Way goes right down to the southern horizon. Actually, the best part of the Milky Way is just below our southern horizon from here. If you were about 10 degrees farther south along the Earth, you know, down into the central United States, you would get to see a little bit more of that Milky Way, and that's really where the beautiful part of the galaxy is. The center of the galaxy is actually right in about here, but it's so low for us that we're looking through a lot of our atmosphere, all of the humidity, the haze, and all that stuff, and it really dims the view. But the farther south you go, the higher this part of the Milky Way will be in the sky, and it is amazing to see it from a far southerly location. Sagittarius, this constellation here, the teapot. It's supposed to be a centaur, but it looks like the teapot. And then over here, Scorpio, the scorpion, Scorpius, pardon me. I'm just going to turn off our horizon here for a moment to show the rest of it. We almost never see this part from Winnipeg. It's just too far south. But this is actually, if you saw the movie Moana, the Disney movie about the there was the fish hook, the magical hook that the rock character was wielding. That's this constellation here, and that's what they call the Scorpion. So a very useful constellation if you're farther south, but from here we just don't get a great view of it. Everything to the left, to the east, is basically fall time constellations. I mean, they're previewing now, but they're pretty much fall. We've got over here Capricorn, the goat, which again I think we talked about last time. Saturn is sitting right about there, and so that's one of the highlights of the sky for sure. Aquarius, the water carrier, Pisces, the fish, and then Pegasus, the horse. These are all really fall constellations. Philip and I suspect Fallon are also asking pointers for what to try and see tonight. Yes, I do have pointers for that. And in fact, it has something to do with this part of the sky. If we go a little farther around into the northeast, we're starting to see the other side of the Milky Way. The winter Milky Way, basically, is arcing up from almost the northern horizon, and it goes pretty much straight overhead. So Cygnus in the Summer Triangle is close to overhead. But down in this area, in Cassiopeia, there's all sorts of wonderful little star clusters as well. In fact, there's one right in here called the Double Cluster, which is a lovely little view, kind of a winter view. But I like looking at it any time that I can. And for sure, we will take a look at that more towards the winter. I think if I was going to be observing this evening, and I am, I would look for the Ring Nebula. It's one of my favorites. It's really hard to go wrong with the Ring Nebula. It's in Lyra, the harp, which is the little the brightest star in the Summer Triangle is Vega in Lyra. The Ring Nebula is right in halfway between these two bottom stars here. So you look for this sort of little, kind of looks like a fish body with like a triangle fin with Vega at the back of it. I don't think it looks like a harp, but anyway, if it was a fish, this would be like the mouth of the fish, and that's where you look for the Ring Nebula. And I think I would also probably take a look for, depending on what my southern view was like, I would look for the Lagoon Nebula. The Lagoon Nebula is right in here. Here's Sagittarius, the teapot, and so it's like steam coming out of the teapot, and it's a little star cluster with a little fuzzy cloud of nebulosity around it. That's a pretty nice view, especially if you have a good southern horizon. You can even spot it in binoculars, certainly in a telescope. And then if you just go up from there, there's all sorts of stuff in and around here. This is the Sagittarius star cloud, just a very dense portion of the Milky Way. And of course, Stellarium will tell you that there's piles of different nebulosities and things like that, but they're not all easily visible. One that is, though, is called, well, it's either called the Omega Nebula or the Swan Nebula, depending on what you learned, but it's this beautiful little cloud of hydrogen gas. You don't normally see the outskirts, but what you see is this part here and this little curved part that kind of looks like, well, it's upside down, but imagine that this was the surface of the water, and this is the body of a swan, and the swan's curved neck and its beak as it sort of swims along the surface of a pond. That's what I learned it as. Beautiful little object in a small telescope. So I would go for that too. We're going to swing all the way over here to the north. The north, the constellations don't change because they're always visible. They just change their position. The Big Dipper over there in the northwest at this time of the year, so it makes a pretty useful signpost. And the more that I look at this picture of the Big Dipper, I mean, we've got the dinosaurs exhibit at the museum right now. There's a couple of big dinosaur skeletons with the long neck kind of thing, and I'm thinking this actually looks way more like a big dinosaur with big long legs and then a big long neck in its head over here. Sorry, Great Bear, Ursa Major. I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. I think I'm just going to call this the dinosaur. The last sign of spring is this star here. This is Arcturus. Arcturus is one of the brightest stars in the northern hemisphere, and we find it by following the arc of the handle of the Big Dipper, and it points towards Arcturus. That's sort of the reminder. Follow the arc to Arcturus. When it's setting in the west, you know that the seasons are starting to change. It's really a springtime star. We're just seeing the end of its appearance in the middle of summer here, and as it disappears, so does summer. Hate to break it to you, but that's the way it goes. Okay, now we're going to advance our time just a little bit here to bring our planets a little higher. We're going to look at the sky around 2:30 in the morning, not ridiculously late compared to the 4:30 or 5 in the morning we had to do before, but you can now see many of the planets above the horizon, actually even by 1 in the morning. Saturn actually rises very early. By in August it's rising by like 10 o'clock kind of thing, and the higher it gets, the better view you have through a telescope, because when something's low on the horizon, you're looking through a lot of atmosphere, you're looking through a lot of the turbulence in the air. If there's heat waves rising from the surface of the Earth from the sun heating up the land during the day, you get all of that distortion happening. When something is up high above us, we're kind of looking through the minimum amount of air to get there. But here we're looking through literally hundreds of kilometers of atmosphere before we get out into the sort of pristine environment of space. And that can really mess with your view. So the best time to look for planets is when they're hitting their highest point in the south. So for Saturn, that's about 2:30 in the morning. Still not all that high. The planets right now happen to be in a part of the sky that isn't well placed for northern observers. Again, if you're heading south, you happen to get you get a better view. 15 years from now, when Saturn is on the other side of its orbit, it'll be the northern hemisphere that'll be favored, and Saturn will be way up high in the sky, and the folks down in Australia will be whining about it because they won't have a great view. So these things change over the seasons, but we at least can get decent views of Saturn now. And also Jupiter. Jupiter is actually is quite a bit higher than it was last year, almost 5 degrees higher than it was last year. And so we're going to be getting some good views of that. In fact, I've got my alarm set for 2:30 tomorrow morning so that if I fall asleep, I can get up and switch scopes to get the planetary scope out to take a look at Jupiter. Jupiter is spectacular. Fallon was saying they got to see the 4 moons, and depending on when you go out, you might see the Great Red Spot or other cloud features and things like that. Just always a great planet to observe. And it's so big that it's the planet that is sort of easiest to see some details on. And then we come to Mars. Mars is the planet that is probably hardest to see some details on, especially when it's not close to us. It's getting closer, but it's still sort of on the way in. And so for us, we're going to have good views in November, December, January. But right now, Mars is still pretty far away. And so it's just beginning its observation season, I guess, as it comes up above the horizon. Now, throughout the course of the month, of course, each day the planets are in slightly different positions. The closer a planet is to us, the more it seems to move in the sky. So Mars seems to move quite a bit from night to night. Jupiter and Saturn, you probably have to go a few nights before you notice that it's really moved relative to the stars. And then the moon is so close to us that every night it moves a huge amount. Here we are on August 12th, and the moon is over by Saturn, basically full moon. And then a couple nights later, it's going to be over by Jupiter, and then a few more nights later, it's going to be over by Mars. All of these dates are given on the Manitoba Museum's website in our current night sky section in the planetarium. I just put in the August calendar a few days early. So you want to see when your photo ops are for getting a nice shot of the moon and a planet in the frame, or if you want to get your binoculars out and see both of them at the same time, you can see all the dates on there. And that's a useful tool. Actually, I think Mars and the Moon and the two star clusters, the Pleiades and the Hyades, is actually going to be a very nice view because they really pair nicely. And I mean, if we look at these in binoculars, just put on the binocular view here, I think we might even be able to see certainly the Moon and Mars together. I wonder if we can get all three. No, not quite. Can't quite fit all the Pleiades in there as well, but still a nice view of things that are coming up. Oh, we got some questions here. Let's see. Is the Swan Nebula visible in binoculars? I would say that they will be visible in large binoculars, so your 20 by 80s, Ulrika, should definitely do it. From a dark site, I think you could see it in smaller binoculars, although it's not a gigantic object, and so you have to be very careful and meticulous and really make sure you're not just moving your binoculars around too quickly. It'll take a careful search to see it in smaller binoculars. I think it'll be pretty easy in the larger ones. Jacqueline's asking, are nebulas forming or dying stars? Yes. It turns out that most of the nebula that we see are actually stars that are forming, the clouds of gas that will eventually make stars or star clusters. And the material is coalescing under gravity and will create stars. And that's that sort of characteristic reddish pinkish color. That's the characteristic color of hydrogen, which is that gas that stars are made out of. There are a few places where a star has died. And when that occurs, the star either blows itself to pieces in a supernova and you get this just shattered wreckage, or it's a slower death. A star like our sun will just sort of puff off its outer layers almost like a expanding smoke ring, and you get something called a planetary nebula. The summer has one of my favorite planetary nebulas, the Ring Nebula. I'm just going to zoom right in here. There's the Ring Nebula. That's the star in the middle that has died, and all that's left is the core of the star, a white dwarf it's called. And then this is the outer layer of the star that has just now been expanding outwards for a number of thousands of years. And so this is what our sun will look like when it eventually runs out of fuel and burns out in 5 billion years or so. So this is a dead star. And then when we were looking at the Lagoon Nebula and some of those other nebulas in the Milky Way here, I have to rewind because we were looking at the morning sky. But things like the Lagoon Nebula, those are star-forming regions. And in fact, the cluster of stars that's in there has been formed by this cloud of gas. And so you often see the two of them sort of associated. Eventually, all of this gas will get used up to make stars, and all that will be left is a star cluster, rather like the Pleiades that we see over here. So all of these objects that we're seeing in the sky is really sort of snapshots of little pieces of stellar life cycle, from birth to death. And because they're happening all over the place, we don't live long enough to see the entire cycle. But by looking at all of these different objects, which are little pieces of that life cycle, we can sort of piece together what order everything happens in. And that's pretty much how we learned about how stars work. Okay, we have a couple of other things to get into, and one of them is very relevant for this evening, but that falls into the category of stuff that we call
cool space stuff.
So, there's a lot of satellites up there. You see these stars moving across the sky. More than half of them right now are Starlink satellites, which are put up by SpaceX to do internet. I know there's a lot of folks here in Manitoba that are using Starlink internet, places that can't get fiber or things like that. There's piles of them up there. And the way that they're designed, they only live a few years, and then they burn up and re-enter the atmosphere. Well, one of the first ones is going to probably re-enter the atmosphere tonight, over Manitoba perhaps. It's hard to say exactly, but there is a possibility that it will enter the atmosphere just when it happens to be visible from our part of the world. That's pretty cool. We don't often get to see satellite re-entries, and to be honest, we probably won't get to see this one either. I mean, it might happen way out over the ocean. The uncertainties are such that it could happen anytime in a 4-hour window, and that means it goes around the Earth like at least twice during that period. But there is a website that tracks all this kind of stuff. It's called SatFlare, and they have this great website that allows you to select, well, first of all, up at the top, it says next to decay. Decay is what happens when the orbit decays and eventually the satellite starts hitting the upper atmosphere and really slows down, and eventually it falls out of orbit. Starlink number 61 is supposed to re-enter. Let's see if they've updated it since I looked at it earlier. Supposed to re-enter. Let's see. Tonight. Oh, they have updated it. Around 2:40. Oh, so that'll be 9:47 plus or minus 2 hours. So literally within less than 3 hours, this is supposed to come down. Right now, it looks like it will come down. I guess what we have to do is see where it will be then. Oh, my scroll window doesn't like it. There we go. One of the great things is that at the bottom, you can basically select predict passes, and it's not actually very well visible here in Manitoba. It only comes up above the horizon a little bit and then enters the Earth's shadow. So it travels along here, but you can't see it because it's not lit up by the sun. Unless, of course, it re-enters the atmosphere and catches on fire. Then you can see it. So this pass is scheduled to occur right around, where's the table here? Oh, it didn't give me the table. Why is it hiding the time? There we go. Starting at 10:27 and 51 seconds is when it rises, and it goes across the sky in about 6 minutes across the southern sky, just skirting right through that Milky Way area. There's Sagittarius down there, there's Scorpio, and the Milky Way would go way up here, and here is the summer triangle. So between about 10:27 and 10:33, keep your eye on the southern sky, because the uncertainty on that time is plus or minus 2 hours. So here it says it'll burn up at 9:47 our time. Well, if it lasts a little bit longer, it'll happen when it's right over top of us. So that is pretty cool. Let me just see if they've updated the band here at all. A little bit. There we go. So the uncertainty basically says that within the 2 hours, that would lead it to here. This pass basically goes right over top of Manitoba. So if it's 2 hours and 10 minutes late instead of 2 hours late, it would happen right over top of us. Odds are we're not going to see it, but maybe we will. So these things actually happen quite often. Like at the top of this list, like there's 5 of them in line here. One of them is tomorrow afternoon at noon. And one of them is the big Chinese rocket booster from their space station that could come down any time in the next couple of days as well. So there's always stuff falling out of the sky, but the odds of seeing it are pretty unlikely. But if you know something's coming, you can at least be ready for it. So tonight I'm going to be out with the camera just in case. You never know, right? And the timing can always change, so it really is kind of a luck kind of thing. But that is kind of a cool thing to keep your eyes open for. Let's see, we had a couple of questions there, but I'm going to get back to them after the cool space stuff here. Let's go on to here. You probably heard that the Russian space agency fired their boss and put in a new guy, and the new guy immediately said that Russia would be pulling out of the space station program after 2024. And then the next day, he clarified that after 2024, he actually meant 2028, because that's after 2024. There's a whole bunch of posturing going on, obviously. The Russian space program was, of course, essential in getting the space station started, Their Soyuz and Progress spacecraft maintained the orbit, bring the crews up, did all of that stuff, and they were the only ones that could do it for a very long time. With the other countries and other companies bringing their spacecraft online, the Russians are finding perhaps that they're not as important of a partner as they were once. And with the war in Ukraine continuing, there's a lot of impetus to not work with Russia. So it's kind of hard to see what will happen. The net result is that this will be a news story every couple of months because someone will say something and then nothing will happen. I strongly suspect that the Russians will continue to partner in the International Space Station even as they begin to build their own space station, because they have indicated that their next space station will be a Russian space station. Speaking of space stations, the Chinese space station has just about doubled in size recently. The Wentian module just attached and made that bigger. If you go onto the a satellite tracking website, you can look for the Tiangong Chinese space station, and it will be much brighter now because it's got this big extra module and a very large set of extra solar panels which reflect a lot of sunlight. So it should become much easier to see. Now the Chinese space station doesn't get as far north as the International Space Station. That means it's not as easy for us to see here in Canada. It's usually very low along the southern horizon. So the brighter it gets, the easier it will be to see. But it's kind of cool. They've got 2 space stations up there with people living on them right now, on those little dots whirling around. Okay, we had a couple of questions here that I wanted to get to. Let's see. Oh, Jennifer says, I like the binocular view on my system. Yes, this is Stellarium software that we've been using. It's a free planetarium software download. You can go to stellarium.org and download this program and run it on your computer. And it's all free. And it's got a bunch of great features. You can use it to print out star charts. You can set it up for your pair of binoculars or your telescope and eyepiece to sort of see what will fit there. You can put cameras into it. You can even control a computer-controlled telescope and have it set up so that you just click something on your screen and the telescope automatically moves to it. It's pretty slick. And for the price of $0, it's pretty hard to beat. So I highly recommend Stellarium. Ulrika is asking, why would a dying or dead star be called a planetary nebula? Excellent question. The glib answer is that astronomers are terrible at naming things. Someone will make a quick temporary name just so that they and their colleagues can refer to the thing as something, and somehow that gets out and it sticks. And then we're stuck 100 years later with a name that makes absolutely no sense. Planetary nebula, if you looked at a planetary nebula through a telescope that wasn't very good, say a 100-year-old telescope, it would look kind of like one of the outer planets, like Uranus and Neptune. And 100 years ago, Uranus had been discovered fairly recently. Neptune was really brand new, and so they were thinking there might be other planets out there. So people were looking for these things that looked like Uranus and Neptune, and they were finding them, but then they weren't moving. So they realized that they were some other object. And because they looked like planets, they called them planetary nebula. They have nothing to do with planets. They are, as we now know, the remains of dying stars, but the name has stuck and has confused generations of first-year astronomy students and backyard astronomers. We just give up trying to understand it, and you just get stuck using the name essentially. So that's where that name comes from, and I'm sure that there are many other examples of, like Pluto, for example. We called Pluto a planet, now we call it a dwarf planet. It's not really either of those things. It's kind of its own thing. We just haven't gotten around to changing the name, but that does illustrate, look how difficult it was to change the name of something in astronomy. You had people picketing and protesting when Pluto was demoted, as they said. So emotions run pretty high on this naming kind of stuff. All right, I think we got all the questions. I do want to encourage you to fill out the surveys that we put out there. It's wonderful to hear what you think. We can also receive all sorts of other information You can hit us up on social media. You can email us. You can subscribe to the Manitoba Museum's e-news if you go to the website and just click on the subscribe to e-news link, and that will give you not only the planetarium schedule and special events, but also the exhibits and the science gallery stuff and all the cool things that are going on. Coming up on Friday, August the 5th, it is first Friday of the month, and that means the museum, science gallery, and planetarium are open in the evening and free from 5 o'clock till 9 o'clock. And we will have some volunteers from the local astronomy club. The Royal Astronomical Society of Canada's Winnipeg Centre will be down with special safe solar telescopes to look at the sun and the sunspots and the prominences and flares and things like that, and also to look at the first quarter moon, which will be a nice sight. So you can come and visit us at the planetarium. I'll be there as well, doing sky shows inside and being outside with the telescopes in between. So that's coming up. We'd love to see you. And then, of course, our 2 live events this month for the Perseid meteor shower and for the Artemis 1 launch. It's going to be a busy summer, and I hope you get a chance to get out there and spend some time under the stars, whether you've got binoculars, a telescope, your unaided eye. Even just sitting inside and thinking about the vastness of space sometimes can be very zen-like, very calming, and very therapeutic. I certainly find it that way anyway. So I hope you enjoy the summer sky. I hope you get a chance to see some things. Come and visit us at the planetarium, and we will see you in 2 weeks. We are now, as of August, going to a bi-weekly format, so there'll be the first 2 weeks from now, there'll be a show. There won't be a show in between, but of course you can always visit the YouTube channel and see all of our archived shows and watch as much Dome at Home as you would like. So I'll see you again in 2 weeks, and hopefully we'll see each other under the stars sometime soon. Oh, and I forgot to put, there we go, all of our image credits, because we had so many image credit contributors this time around. Thank you so much. We love to see your pictures. We love to hear your stories, and please share them with us so we can share them with the audience and inspire people to do more cool stuff. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon.